How much can a mother endure before something inside her finally snaps? That thought was the only thing keeping me upright as I stood outside my daughter's house, clutching the small wrapped gift I had spent 3 weeks choosing. I had come early, too early. Maybe. I wanted to be there when Clara opened the door and smiled the way she used to when she was a little girl. The porch light buzzed above me. The night colder than I expected for New Year's Eve in Tacoma. I pulled my coat tighter and steadied my breath. Inside. Voices were loud, warm, alive. Laughter spilled through the windows. I lifted my hand to knock, but then I heard him, Daniel, my son-in-law. He laughed the way people laugh when they know they are safe from being overheard. Thank God the old woman didn't come. My fingers froze in midair. Someone else chimed in, amused, playful. Seriously, man, you dodged a bullet. Then Clara's voice, my Clara soft, almost embarrassed, but still agreeing. I told her it was better if she rested tonight, she whispered. She would have made things complicated. A woman laughed. Mothers like that always do. The gift slipped a little in my hand. I tightened my grip, trying to keep my breath from shaking. I felt the floor beneath me tilt, as if someone had quietly cut the wires holding up the world I knew. Daniel kept going. She's just a lot. You know, I can finally have a normal evening. Someone joked about old ladies and their drama. Another voice mimicked a nagging mother. More laughter. Light. Careless. Cutting. Each word landed on me like a blow. I didn't move. Didn't make a sound. I stood outside my own daughter's door while the people she loved mocked everything I had ever been to her. Clara spoke again. The part that broke me clean through. It's such a relief she's not here. For a moment, I didn't feel the cold. I didn't feel anything at all. I simply lowered my hand, stepped back, and pressed my lips together so tightly I tasted blood. I wanted to knock. I wanted to go inside and pretend I had heard nothing. I wanted to believe she didn't mean it. But the truth had already settled in my bones. Fireworks cracked somewhere down the street. The sound bouncing against the houses. I turned and walked down the steps slowly, the gift still in my hands, the ribbons brushing against my wrist like a goodbye. As I reached the sidewalk, a faint voice called from behind me, Mrs. Kessler. I froze. I hadn't realized anyone had been near the door. When I turned, I saw her, Emma Torres, Clara's old friend from high school. Her eyes were wide, her mouth slightly open, the kind of expression people have when they witness something they were never supposed to see. Our eyes met for a single heartbeat, long enough for her to understand everything without me saying a word. I turned away before she could speak and began walking into the cold Tacoma night, leaving the voices behind me, leaving the woman I had been behind me too, ahead of me. The distant fireworks kept echoing like warnings of what was coming next. The sentence kept replaying in my head as I walked Daniel's careless laugh, followed by Clara's soft agreement. The exact tone of her voice pressed into my memory like a bruise that refused to fade. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even annoyance. It was relief. That was what cut the deepest. I had reached the end of the walkway when the door creaked open behind me. Mrs. Kessler, Emma Torres called again, more firmly this time. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want anyone to see my face. But Emma was already stepping toward me, her heels tapping sharply on the concrete. Did you hear all of that? Her voice was low, urgent. I swallowed hard. Go back inside. Emma, enjoy the evening. She shook her head. Evelina, wait. But I kept walking, forcing myself forward. I heard her breath hitch, then her footsteps retreat. I thought she was letting it go. I was wrong. Minutes later, as I stood at the corner waiting for my chest to loosen enough for me to breathe properly, The sound of a door slamming open burst behind me, followed by raised voices. Emma had gone back inside. I didn't want to turn around, but the voices carried down the street. "Clara!" "What was that?" Emma demanded loudly. Her voice cut through the noise of the party like a knife. There was silence first, then Clara answered. Her tone strained. "Emma, not now, please." Emma didn't lower her voice. "You told everyone you didn't want your mother here." "Are you serious?" Daniel laughed again, trying to smooth it over. "Emma." "Relax. We were joking. I was standing by the door," Emma said sharply. "I heard every word." So did she. The noise inside shifted chairs, scraping, someone whispering. A woman muttered something like, "Oh no," as if the evening had suddenly become dangerous to touch. Daniel tried again, voice strained but mocking. "Come on. Eva wasn't out there. You're making a scene." Emma fired back. "I saw her. She was leaving." That stopped everything. Clara's voice cracked. "She left." "You think she didn't hear you?" Emma pressed. "She was right outside the door." "Clara." She heard every single thing. A muffled gasp spread through the room. I could picture it without looking. Clara's face draining of color. Daniel rubbing the back of his neck. Guests exchanging uneasy glances, unsure whether to defend the hosts or pretend they hadn't participated. One voice spoke timidly. "Maybe we all went too far," Daniel snapped. "It was a joke. People are too sensitive." Emma didn't let him hide. It wasn't a joke to her. She walked away like someone just stabbed her. A man cleared his throat. "Let's just calm down." "No," Emma said. "You humiliated her. All of you." There was a long, painful pause. Clara finally spoke again, her voice trembling. "Emma, this is my night. Please stop." Emma's response was soft and devastating. "It stopped being your night the second you laughed about your own mother like she was a burden." Someone whispered, "She's right." Another agreed quietly. That wasn't okay. The shift in the room felt heavy even from where I stood down the block. The warmth of the party dimmed into something cold and uncertain. The perfect evening, Clara had built decorations, guests. Curated smiles was unraveling thread by thread. Daniel muttered angrily, "This is ridiculous." But no one laughed with him this time. I tightened my coat around me, feeling each word settle behind me like distant thunder. The world inside that house was cracking, and everyone knew who caused the first fracture. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I simply started walking again, breath steady, steps careful, carrying the weight of what I'd heard and the heavier truth underneath it. Somewhere behind me, voices rose again, panic, excuses, confusion, and Emma's sharper, steadier tone cut through them. But I kept moving forward. I was beginning to understand something. If the person you hurt the most finally decides she's done, there is no celebration in the world big enough to drown out the sound of consequences walking away. The rain followed me down the street like it had been waiting for this moment. It wasn't heavy, just steady enough to soak through my coat and settle into my bones. My steps felt slow, as if the ground itself resisted letting me move forward. "Why do the longest walks happen when your heart feels the smallest?" I whispered to myself, though no one was around to hear it. I held the wrapped gift against my chest, trying to keep it dry. It was a small porcelain figurine of a mother and daughter Clara used to point at ones like it when she was little. She would say, "It looks like us. Mama, I bought it 3 weeks ago." Imagining her face lighting up again. The streetlights blurred in the rain as I walked through downtown Tacoma. Cars splashed past. A couple rushed under an umbrella. Someone shouted, "Happy New Year" from a balcony. All these pieces of other people's joy floated around me, but none of them touched me. My mind kept drifting back to those New Year's Eves when Clara was 5 or 6. She used to sit on my lap, counting down with a sparkler in her hand. "Mama, next year I'll be older," she'd say proudly. And I'd always answer, "You'll always be mine." No matter how old you get, now her husband laughed about how grateful he was that the old woman stayed away. I stopped walking for a moment. My breath caught in my throat. The gift felt heavier with every step, as if it were carrying the years I never realized were slipping away. At the corner of Pacific Avenue, I lifted the gift as if to throw it into the trash bin beside the bus stop. My hand trembled. The ribbon brushed my wrist again, soft and familiar, reminding me of nights spent wrapping Clara's presents and writing her little notes in loopy handwriting. I lowered it slowly. "It's still yours," I murmured, "even if she doesn't want it." I turned toward the hilltop neighborhood, the streets quiet and familiar. The rain let up slightly as I climbed the hill, but everything felt heavier. My coat, my shoes, even the air. My phone buzzed inside my pocket. I didn't take it out. Not yet. As I reached my block, I saw the glow of porch lights and the vague outlines of neighbors settling into their celebrations. Someone was cooking tamales. I recognized the smell. Someone else was laughing loudly behind a cracked window. My house looked exactly the same as it had every year, small, sturdy, painted soft gray by Henry more than 20 years ago. I walked up the steps, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The quiet was almost startling. The phone buzzed again. Clara's name flashed on the screen when I finally looked. One missed call, then a second, then a text. "Mom, where are you? You said you were coming." Another buzz. "Mom," then another. "Can you please answer?" I set the gift on my kitchen table. I wiped the water from my face with the back of my sleeve. The phone buzzed again, louder this time. I held it for a moment, staring at Clara's name like it belonged to a stranger. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I pressed the button and turned the phone off completely. The silence filled the room, solid and final. For the first time in my life, I chose not to answer. Outside, the muffled sound of fireworks rolled across the city, echoing through the walls of my little house as if marking a beginning one I hadn't planned for, but could no longer avoid. When does silence speak louder than apologies, I asked myself, as I stood in my dim kitchen, the only light coming from the small lamp over the sink. My phone lit up on the table again. Clara calling. I didn't touch it. The ringing filled the whole house, sharp and frantic, like she was pounding on the walls instead of the screen. When it went to voicemail, it started again almost instantly. Then again, then again. Her voice messages came through one after another. "Mom, are you home? I thought maybe you got stuck in traffic. Call me back." Another, "Mom, seriously, can you at least text me? Everyone is asking where you are." Her tone shifted on the third, "Okay, this is getting weird. You never ignore my calls." On the fourth, it cracked. "Mom, answer me. Why are you doing this?" The fifth came minutes later, clipped and tight. "Fine, if you're upset, just say something, but ignoring me isn't helping." I clenched my jaw and turned away from the phone. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something new, something I hadn't felt in decades. Control. The sixth message came from Daniel, not Clara. His voice was loud, annoyed, and dismissive. "Evelina, this is ridiculous. Emma twisted everything. You know how she is always trying to make trouble. We were joking. You're taking it wrong. Call Clara before she makes this a bigger deal than it is." His words left a bitter taste in my mouth. They always had a story where they were the victims. The phone buzzed again, vibrating so hard it slid an inch across the table. My fingers twitched toward it. Old instincts pushing me to soothe, to fix, to explain myself the way I always had. I pulled my hand back. My chest tightened with the effort, but I didn't answer. Not this time. I walked to the living room and sat on the edge of the couch. It felt strange quiet, almost too quiet. My whole adult life had been spent responding to Clara's needs, her fears, her plans, her mistakes, her moods, every call, every text, every hint of distress pulled me back into place. Tonight, I stayed still. A soft knock came at my door. Evelina. A familiar voice called, "Micha, are you awake?" I got up and opened the door to find Doña Rosa from next door wrapped in her knitted shawl. Worry etched across her face. "The lights are on," she said gently, "and I heard your phone ringing. I thought maybe something happened." "I'm fine," I told her softly. She looked at me for a long moment. Then her expression changed. She understood something without me having to say it. "Come sit with me," she said. "You shouldn't be alone on New Year's." "I'm not alone," I said. "Not anymore." Her eyes softened. She reached out and squeezed my hand. Behind me, the phone buzzed again. Clara's name lit up the screen, glowing through the dark like a warning. I walked back to the table, looked at the vibrating phone, and let it ring until it went silent. Something inside me shifted, small but unmistakable. For the first time in my life, I wasn't answering out of fear of disappointing my daughter. I wasn't answering at all. Outside, distant fireworks cracked through the night. But inside my house, a different sound filled the air. My own decisions settling firmly into place. The beginning of what had always been hidden beneath years of quiet obedience. What do we discover about ourselves when we open the things we have kept closed for too long? I whispered as I stood in my bedroom, the house still dim and quiet from the night before. My phone lay face down on the table, silent only because I had turned it off. The weight of that decision still sat in my chest, a strange mix of fear and relief. But another weight pulled at me, a metal one. I walked to the back of my closet and reached behind an old stack of blankets. My fingers touched the cold edge of the box. I dragged it out slowly, dust clinging to the corners. The box had belonged to Henry. He gave it to me the year before he died, telling me, "Keep everything important in here. Lena, someday you'll need it." I knelt beside the bed and opened it. The hinges creaked, as if protesting being woken after so many years. Inside, the papers were neatly layered the way Henry always organized everything. Savings ledgers, property deeds, insurance documents, his handwriting on small notes. I lifted the first paper, our joint savings, untouched since his death, a little more than $50,000. The second, the deeds to 2 small rental units in South Tacoma properties Henry had quietly invested in over the years, always saying it was for our older days. The third, a life insurance document I had forgotten existed. $50,000 that had grown with interest over 12 years. Henry had left me enough to live comfortably. Not rich. No, but secure. I stared at the documents spread across the bed. Clara had never asked about my finances. She assumed I lived on a modest pension. She assumed the little house on Hilltop was barely paid off. She assumed I had nothing. She saw me as a burden because she believed I had nothing to offer. A mother who struggles is a mother someone can ignore. A mother who needs help is easy to push aside. But this mother had more than Clara ever imagined. My fingers tightened on the insurance paper. I heard Henry's voice again, warm and patient. "You give too much. One day, you'll have to keep something for yourself." A knock on my front door startled me. I gently closed the box and stood. Doña Rosa's voice floated through. "Evelina, I brought you oatmeal. You barely ate last night." I opened the door. Letting her in, she looked at me closely. "You look different this morning." I opened something I should have opened a long time ago. I said. She nodded, as if she knew exactly what I meant without seeing the box in my hands. "Good," she whispered. "It's time." I set the oatmeal on the counter and went back to the bedroom. I placed the metal box on the bed again, keeping the lid open this time. My life, my security, my choices. Not Clara's. Not Daniel's. Mine. The box no longer felt heavy. It felt like possibility, like a mother rediscovering that the power she thought she lost had been waiting quietly in the dark, and the person who underestimated her would soon learn exactly what she was capable of. What moment finally forces a mother to choose herself? I whispered as I sat on the edge of my bed, the metal box still open beside me. The papers inside didn't just hold numbers and signatures. They held a truth I had avoided for years. I had stability. I had choices. I was not the helpless woman Clara believed I was. But betrayal has a way of scraping wounds raw all over again. I pressed my palms together, trying to steady my breath. My bay. The sound of Clara and Daniel laughing about me, mocking me, kept circling inside my head like an unwanted visitor. Doña Rosa had left a few minutes earlier, giving my hand one of her gentle squeezes before stepping out. "Call me if you need something." "Mija," she said. I nodded, but my mind was far away. I whispered Henry's name under my breath. You would know what to say. And in the quiet of the room, I heard him the way I used to when I sat beside him in the hospital bed during those last months. "Don't let anyone treat you like you're small, not even family." He had said it one night after Clara snapped at me for folding her laundry wrong. She was 20 then. I had laughed it off, told him she was just stressed about college exams. But Henry saw something I hadn't wanted to see. "She needs boundaries," he said. "You're allowed to have limits." I hadn't listened. Now the consequences were sitting in my chest like a stone. I stood abruptly and walked to the kitchen table. My hands shook as I pulled out a pen and a stack of blank paper. The house felt too quiet, like it was waiting for me to speak first. I set the first sheet in front of me and wrote a title across the top. "Changes to my estate." I stared at the words. Then I began writing. 1 Clara will no longer inherit the rental units in South Tacoma. Those homes were Henry's pride. Purchased with overtime hours and careful planning, they deserved respect. 2 Clara will not have access to the savings account Henry left me. She assumed I had nothing. She used that assumption to justify treating me like a burden. 3. The life insurance money will not be used for Clara's emergencies. I had spent years saving her from financial mistakes she never learned from. My breath grew steadier as the list grew longer. 4. Clara will no longer decide where I spend holidays or how I live my life. 5. Clara will not be the executor of my estate. 6. Clara will not control my medical decisions. With each line, I felt something loosen inside me, like someone was untying knots that had lived in my spine for decades. My phone vibrated suddenly against the countertop. Startling me, I turned it over. 7 missed calls, 5 messages, 3 from Clara, 2 from Daniel, 1 from an unknown number, probably a guest from the party trying to check in. I placed the phone face down again. For years, Clara's voice had been the compass I followed every need, every request, every disappointment. I shaped myself around her comfort, around her moods, around her expectations. But tonight, I did something different. I drew a final line at the bottom of the page. 7, I will choose peace, even if it means choosing distance. I sat back, letting the pen fall from my fingers. The list lay in front of me stark, honest, unmoving. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was truth. My truth. The one I had been too afraid to acknowledge. My house felt different now, still quiet, but no longer waiting. I folded the paper carefully and slid it into the metal box, nestling it between Henry's documents where it belonged. When I closed the lid, it clicked with a certainty I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer the woman Clara walked over, and the life she had tried to erase me from would no longer be the one I lived. I stood, feeling taller than I had the night before. A mother can begin again, even after being pushed aside. And now that I had taken the first step, I intended to keep walking. Who are we when we finally speak? Without fear. I kept hearing that question in my head as I walked into the law office on South 10th Street, the metal box tucked tightly under my arm. The receptionist looked up with a polite smile. "Do you have an appointment?" "Yes," I said. "With Arturo Benitez." She nodded and gestured toward a hallway. "He's ready for you. Mrs. Kessler?" "Evelina," I corrected softly. "Just Evelina." When I stepped into his office, Arturo Benitez rose from behind his desk. He was in his early 70s, gray hair swept back neatly, eyes steady and patient. Henry always said Arturo was the only lawyer he trusted. "Evelina," he greeted me warmly, shaking my hand. "It's been too long. Please, sit." I sat down, placing the metal box on the edge of his desk. He gave it a thoughtful look. "I take it this is not a casual visit," he said gently. "No," I answered. "It isn't." He folded his hands. "Tell me what happened." For a long moment, I didn't speak. Then words poured out: Clara's New Year's Eve dinner, the laughter, Daniel's mocking voice, Clara's agreement, my walk home in the rain, the calls I didn't answer. I told him all of it without softening anything, without apologizing for the pain that trembled in my voice. Arturo listened without interrupting, without tilting his head or giving sympathetic noises. He listened like a man who understood that stopping me would only break what little steadiness I had left. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "You are ready for a change?" "I'm ready," I said. "More than ready." I opened the metal box, sliding the documents toward him. "I want to revise everything. My will, my assets, my insurance, all of it." His eyebrows lifted slightly, but he remained calm. "Tell me what you intend." I took a breath, steadying myself. "I want to create a fund for elderly women who have been abandoned or mistreated by their families. 80% of everything goes into that fund, and the remaining 20%," he asked. "For me," I said, "for my comfort, my peace, my life." He made a small, approving sound. "And your daughter Clara will receive nothing," I said. "Not until after my death. And only the house. Nothing else." Arturo's pen stopped above the paper. "This is a serious change. Evelina, I know. Are you making this decision out of anger?" "No," I said. "I'm making it out of clarity." He watched me for a moment, then nodded. "Then I support you." Just like that, I asked. "You are not the first mother who has sat in that chair with tears in her voice," he said quietly. "And you will not be the last. Your reasons are sound. Your mind is steady. Your heart is broken, not reckless." I let out a shaky breath. He continued, "We will create a formal structure for the fund. It will operate under your name and mission. We will reassign your assets legally, and Clara will be notified once the documents are finalized." "Good," I whispered. Arturo leaned forward. "Evelina, you are allowed to choose a life that protects you for the first time in years." I believe those words. He drafted the first set of documents, placing each form in front of me. My hand trembled as I picked up the pen, but when it came time to sign my name, the ink flowed steady. The letters curled cleanly across the page, no hesitation, no apology. As I finished the last signature, Arturo smiled gently. "There it is. What as I asked?" The moment the consequences of truth finally became yours to command, I closed the pen and set it down. I hadn't expected power to feel like this: quiet, calm, absolute, but it did. How much truth can a daughter handle before her world cracks, I wondered, as I stood at the post office counter, watching the clerk stamp the envelope. The letter lay between us, white, ordinary, harmless looking, but inside it, Every word I had signed with Arturo Benitez carried the sharp edge of consequences Clara never expected. Revisions to my will, removal of her authority, details of the fund she would never touch, a boundary set in ink, certified and tracked. The clerk said, "She'll have to sign for it." "Good," I murmured. When I stepped outside, the wind bit at my face, but for once, the cold did not feel bigger than me. Clara received the letter the next afternoon during lunch break at her office. At least that's what she told me later, her voice shaking, her words tumbling over each other like she didn't know which emotion to grab first. She called exactly 3 minutes after signing for the envelope. "Of course." I did not answer. The sixth call finally produced a voicemail. Her voice choked and ragged. "Mom, what is this? Why did I get a legal notice? Why didn't you just talk to me? I don't understand." Another call, another voicemail. "Please answer. Daniel is saying this is just you being dramatic. But this doesn't look dramatic. This looks real." Her voice cracked at that last word. Real. When she called again, she did not sound confused anymore. She sounded frightened. "Mom, I need you to call me back. Right now. Please." The phone buzzed again, seconds later. I let it ring, then ring again. An hour passed. Then another voicemail, this time from Daniel. "Evelina, you are blowing this out of proportion. Clara didn't mean any of it. You should have talked to us before filing whatever this is. It's irresponsible. Call me immediately." Irresponsible. Interesting word choice from a man who mocked me in front of a room full of people. He called again 10 minutes later. "Answer the phone. You owe us an explanation." I set the phone down on the table and walked to the living room. I brewed tea. I folded blankets. I did not respond. By the third hour, Clara's tone had changed again, panic deepening into a frantic edge. "Mom, what did you sign? What fund? Why does it say 80% of everything? Why is my name only mentioned once? I don't understand. And Daniel won't stop blaming me. Please answer." But I didn't. For years, every crack in Clara's world had sent me running, patching, soothing, fixing what she didn't appreciate and took for granted. Not this time. As night settled over the quiet hilltop neighborhood, I sat in my kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own heartbeat settling into a new rhythm. Another voicemail appeared, then another, then silence. Not because she stopped calling my phone, simply ran out of battery and shut off. I didn't plug it in. Clara had finally touched the truth she never believed existed. I was no longer the mother who bent, folded, and shrank herself to fit her comfort. And when the person she dismissed suddenly stopped depending on her, her perfect world began to collapse under its own weight. I stood up slowly, poured myself tea, and let the silence stay. What do we owe someone who only comes when they lose something? The question pressed against my ribs as the pounding on my front door rattled the frame. "Mom!" Open the door. Clara's voice cracked through the wood, sharp with panic. Behind her, Daniel barked. "Evelina, this is ridiculous! Open up, right now." Their fists hit the door again, louder this time. I took a slow breath and walked toward it, each step steady. I unlocked the deadbolt but didn't open it all the way, just enough to see their faces. Clara's eyes were red and swollen. Daniel's jaw was tight with fury. "Mom, what did you do?" Clara gasped. "What is this legal notice? Why would you send something like that to me at work?" Daniel cut in before I could speak. "This is Emma's fault. She's stirring things up again. She made you think we said something awful." I kept my voice calm. "Emma didn't make me think anything." Clara sucked in a breath. "So you're admitting you hurt us, Mom? Please. It was nothing. Just people talking. It wasn't serious. It was serious enough that you meant it." I said. "That's not fair," Clara cried out. "You were never supposed to hear that. That doesn't make it less true, I answered. Daniel stepped forward, trying to wedge the door wider with his shoulder. This whole thing is blown out of proportion. Clara told me you always get sensitive during the holidays, Clara snapped. Daniel, stop talking. You brought this on yourself. He said, voice rising. You didn't show up. You embarrassed her. I stared at him through the narrow opening. I did show up. He blinked. Thrown off for a moment, I continued. I stood at the door. I heard everything. Clara's breath hitched. Mom, please. I was overwhelmed, that's all. It was a joke. People were watching. I didn't mean... You meant every word, I said softly. Relief. That was what I heard in your voice. She shook her head, tears spilling. No. Mom, I was frustrated. I didn't want you to feel pressured. Daniel interrupted again. Louder. We apologized. Now undo the paperwork. I tightened my grip on the door. No. Clara sucked in a raw, desperate breath. Mom, you can't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you. I said, I'm doing something for myself. A door across the street creaked open. Mrs. Patel stepped out onto her porch, pretending to adjust her hanging plant. 2 houses down, Mr. Hampton paused mid-smoke. Eyes narrowed. Small neighborhood. Thin walls. Curious ears. Clara noticed and wiped her face quickly. Shame flickering across her features. Can we please talk inside? She whispered. No, I said, not tonight. Daniel huffed. Voice full of contempt. Unbelievable. She finally gets a taste of power and turns into this. Clara flinched. Daniel, stop. He didn't. You're making a mistake, Evelina. You think you can live without us? I looked him dead in the eyes. I already am. Silence fell. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Real. Clara's voice trembled. Mom, please don't do this. I shook my head. I'm done being spoken to like I don't matter. Daniel scoffed and threw his hands up. We're leaving. He stormed down the steps. Clara hesitated, staring at me like she wanted to reach for something that wasn't there anymore. Mom, please call me. Her voice broke. Please. I closed the door gently. No slam. No theatrics. Just a quiet line drawn after a lifetime of pretending it wasn't there. Behind the door, their footsteps faded, leaving only the truth hanging in the air. The truth that surfaces when excuses finally stop working. How powerful is a single no when it's 30 years late? The question stayed with me long after Clara and Daniel walked away from my porch. The next morning, the knocking began again, quieter this time, almost timid. I opened the door just enough to see Clara standing alone on the steps. Daniel's car was parked at the curb, engine running, his figure stiff behind the wheel. Mom, please, Clara whispered. Can we talk? Just us? I stepped aside but didn't invite her in. She entered anyway, wiping her eyes with the edge of her sleeve. I didn't sleep. She said, I kept thinking about that letter, about what you changed. I don't understand why you're doing this to me. I'm not doing anything to you. I said carefully, I'm doing something for myself. She flinched at my tone. You sound like someone else. No, I replied. I finally sound like me. She swallowed hard. Mom, you know I didn't mean any of the things I said. People say stupid things when they're stressed. You shouldn't take it so personally. That was not stupidity. I said, that was honesty you didn't think I'd hear. Her voice sharpened. So what? You're just going to ruin my life over one bad moment. Your life is not my responsibility. I said, not anymore. She shook her head, tears gathering again. Mom, you're my mother. You don't get to just cut me off. I didn't cut you off, I said quietly. I cut off the entitlement. The words hit her like a slap. I am not entitled. You expected me to forgive that night before you even apologized. I said, you expected me to answer your calls the second you felt uncomfortable. You expected me to take care of you emotionally, even after you humiliated me in front of your friends. That's not fair, she whispered. It is, I said. It's the truth. She paced the room, arms folded tightly across her chest. Mom, I was overwhelmed. I was planning a dinner. I had guests. I didn't mean to sound relieved. You were relieved. I said, you hurt me because you thought I'd never walk away. She stopped moving. The silence between us thickened until it felt heavy enough to hold in my hands. Mom, don't say that. Her voice cracked open. Please don't say that. The door burst open suddenly as Daniel stomped inside. Are we still doing this, Evelina? You need to fix what you did. Clara is falling apart. Get out of my house, I said. He blinked, startled. Excuse me, out! I repeated. Now. Clara grabbed his arm. Daniel, please. Not like this. But Daniel shook her off and pointed at me. You're just being dramatic. You want attention. Fine, you got it. Now undo the changes. I stepped closer, meeting his eyes fully. You do not speak to me like that. This conversation is between me and my daughter. You may leave. The authority in my voice startled even Clara. Daniel scoffed. Unbelievable. Then he stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Clara sank onto the couch, shoulders shaking. Mom, I don't want to lose you. You're not losing me, I said gently, but you are losing the version of me who never said no. She buried her face in her hands. I sat across from her, not beside her. A boundary, a quiet one, a necessary one. The first no was out in the open, now not shouted, not cruel, just real. And the moment a mother finally stood tall, someone else had already begun to fall. How fast does the truth spread when silence finally breaks, I wondered, as I set a pot of water on the stove. The house still echoing with the tension Clara and Daniel left behind. A sharp knock came at the door. I opened it to find Doña Rosa standing there, holding a container wrapped in a towel. Her eyes were fiery, protective, the kind of expression only a woman who has lived a long life of her own battles can wear. I heard raised voices last night, she said, and this morning everyone on the block is whispering. She pushed the container into my hands. You need to eat. I tried to smile. You didn't have to. I know, she interrupted, stepping inside like she owned the place. But you looked like you needed someone who isn't yelling at you. That nearly undid me. She sat at my kitchen table and pointed to the seat across from her. Tell me. I told her not every detail, but enough. Enough for her to understand the weight. By the time I finished, her jaw was set like stone. Mija, she said, leaning forward. You did the right thing. A mother is a blessing, not a servant, and anyone who forgets that deserves consequences. Her words felt like a blanket around my shoulders. A car door slammed outside. When I glanced through the window, I saw Mrs. Patel from across the street, pretending to check her mailbox, glancing repeatedly at my house. Mr. Hampton stood near his porch, arms crossed. Watching, too. Tacoma talked. It always had. But for once, the whispers didn't feel like judgment pressing against me, they felt like validation. Doña Rosa noticed my glance. You know how it goes, she said. People talk, but this time, they're talking about her. A mix of guilt and relief twisted in my stomach. Another knock came. Softer this time. When I opened the door, Emma Torres stood there, hands clasped, expression fragile with regret. Mrs. Kessler, I'm so sorry. Her voice shook slightly. I didn't know if I should come. I wanted you to know I didn't mean to make things worse. You didn't. I said, you told the truth. Emma swallowed hard. Clara is furious with me, but she needed to hear it. And honestly, People needed to know. It wasn't right. Any of it. I nodded, the corners of my eyes warming. Thank you, Emma, for seeing me that night. She stepped closer. You deserve better. I hope you know that. Doña Rosa appeared behind me, arms crossed with approval. She does, she said loudly. Emma offered a small smile before heading back to her car. When I closed the door, the house felt different, fuller somehow, not with noise, but with presence, with support. I sat back at the table with Doña Rosa for the first time in a long time. I said quietly, I don't feel alone. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You were never alone. You just didn't have the right people looking at you. The warmth of her touch settled in my chest. Outside, neighbors lingered, watching, whispering not with disdain, but with recognition. A whole community had seen what one daughter never bothered to look for, and the truth of that was only beginning to unfold. What happens when a carefully curated life begins to crack? The questions settled in me as I imagined Clara stepping into her office the next day, pretending everything was normal. She called that evening not to apologize, but to vent. The moment I answered, her voice burst through the speaker. Mom, do you know what happened today? No, I said. Tell me. She sucked in a shaky breath. Someone at work saw the certified letter. I left it on my desk for a minute, and people started asking questions. Personal questions. What kind of questions? About you, she snapped. About why my mother sent me legal documents in the middle of a workday. I had to pretend it was some kind of tax update. It was humiliating. I stayed quiet, letting her speak. And then, Clara continued, voice rising. Emma had the nerve to post some cryptic message online about how respect is a two-way street. Everyone knows what she meant. That isn't Emma's responsibility, I said. Oh, don't defend her, Clara shot back. She made things worse. I exhaled slowly. Clara, you embarrassed yourself, not her. Silence. Not long, just long enough to sting. She cleared her throat sharply. Well, my friends are avoiding me now. No one wants to take sides. They all think I'm... Her voice dipped. Low and bitter. They think I'm ungrateful. Are they wrong? I asked. She inhaled sharply. You're supposed to defend me. I did. I said, for 30 years. Another silence. Longer this time. Then she whispered, Daniel is furious. I heard the exhaustion in her voice. The fear, the loneliness, but I didn't rescue her from it. What did he say? I asked. He said I made us look like fools, Clara muttered. He said I should have handled you better, that none of this would have happened if I hadn't said anything at the dinner. And what did you say to him? I didn't know what to say. Her voice cracked. He barely looked at me tonight. Mom, he blamed me for all of it. For Emma's scene, for the neighbors staring, for the letter. I waited. Clara finally whispered. He called me entitled. My breath stilled. It wasn't joy, it wasn't vindication, but it was recognition. Daniel had thrown her own reflection back at her, and for the first time, she saw it clearly. And what did you tell him? I asked. That he was being cruel. Her voice wavered. He laughed. He said I never cared about cruelty when it was aimed at you. I leaned back in my chair, the truth settling heavy in the air. Mom, my whole life feels like it's falling apart, Clara said. Everything I worked for, everything I built, it all feels like it's slipping. You're facing consequences. I said simply. She whimpered. Am I a bad daughter? My lips trembled. I'm not the one who can answer that. Her breath hitched. I don't know what to do. I felt the weight of her unraveling, not to hold for her, not to fix, but to witness. You can start, I said gently, by learning to look at what you've done, not what you've lost. She cried softly, but didn't argue. And for the first time in her life, my silence didn't protect her. It revealed her, a daughter falling. Not because I let her go, but because she finally saw the edges of the world she had built and the ground that waited beneath her. How do you apologize to someone you thought would never leave? The question settled in me as I sat on the couch. The house quiet, the evening slow. I had begun folding laundry when a soft knock tapped against the front door, not pounding, not desperate, soft. When I opened it, Clara stood there alone. She wore no makeup, no jewelry. Her eyes were swollen, not the dramatic redness she used to exaggerate after fights with friends, but the deep kind that came from hours of crying she couldn't hide. "Hi, Mom," she whispered. I stepped aside but didn't say a word. She walked in slowly, almost cautiously, as if afraid the air itself might break around her. She sat at the table, folding her hands in her lap. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "I don't expect anything from you tonight." I stayed silent. "I'm not here to defend myself," she said, "or to explain anything. I need to tell you something." I placed the folded cloth on the counter and sat across from her, waiting. "I was wrong," Clara whispered. "I was cruel. I didn't even realize how much until everything fell apart this week. My friends, my job, Daniel." She swallowed, voice shaking. "Everyone saw me the way I treated you. And for the first time, I saw it too." Her shoulders curled inward, as if she were trying to make herself smaller. "I'm ashamed," she said. "Not because of what people think, but because of what you heard. Because you heard me say something no daughter should ever say." I kept my eyes on her, steady, but unreadable. She exhaled shakily. "You were always there for me, even when I didn't deserve it. I didn't notice how much you held together for me until I watched everything start slipping out of my hands." Clara looked up at me, eyes filled with a sorrow that didn't need decoration. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said, "not because I want anything, not because of the will, not because of consequences, but I'm sorry because I hurt you, and I don't know how to undo it." Her words were raw, no self-justification, no excuses, no manipulation curled inside the syllables. Just truth. I let out a slow breath. "I hear your apology." She nodded quickly, tears spilling. "I know it doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't erase what I said." "No," I said softly. "It doesn't." She lowered her head, accepting it without argument. That, more than anything, told me how deeply she had cracked open. I continued, "But it matters that you said the truth out loud. Not for me. For you." Her breath shook as she nodded again. "I'm trying, Mom. I really am. I can see that." She looked up again, searching my expression for something approval, forgiveness, hope. I didn't hide from her. I didn't soften. But I didn't close the door inside myself either. "We're not going back to how things were," I said. "I know," she whispered. "But we can move slowly," I added. "With boundaries, with honesty." Clara pressed her hands to her face, trying to steady herself. "Thank you. That's more than I expected." There was a gentleness in her voice I hadn't heard since she was little. Something unarmored. Something quiet. Something real. She stood to leave, turning toward the door with a shaky breath. Before stepping out, she paused. "Mom, even if it takes years, I want to earn your trust again." I nodded. Not with a promise, but with acknowledgement. She opened the door and stepped into the cool evening. She did not look back, and I let her go not away, but forward. The kind of forward that only grows out of honest silence. What grows after the truth burns everything down, I asked myself as I stood in the recreation room of the Hilltop Community Center, handing out cups of warm tea to a circle of elderly women. It had been Doña Rosa's idea. "You need people who understand your heart," she told me one morning. "Not people who only show up when they need something, So I went with her once, just to observe, then again, and again. Eventually, I found myself arriving before she did. The women welcomed me with gentle smiles and stories that stretched across decades. Stories of losing husbands, rebuilding lives, raising children alone, and finding pieces of themselves they once thought gone. Evelina has a steady hand. One of them, Mrs. Hampton, said as I helped her knit, she'd be good leading the memory journal group. I laughed softly. I've never led anything before. Then it's time, she replied, patting my arm. And in that room, surrounded by voices seasoned with grief, wisdom, and survival, I felt something shift inside me. Purpose. Not the kind built around someone else's needs, but the kind that grows from my own. 2 weeks passed before Clara reached out again. This time, she didn't knock at the door or call repeatedly. She sent a message simple, careful, unentitled. Mom, can I come by sometime this weekend, only if you want me to? I waited until the next morning to respond. Yes, Saturday afternoon. When she arrived, she didn't look frantic or ashamed. She looked humbled, nervous, human. She stood in the entryway, holding a container. I made soup. I wasn't sure what you liked anymore, so I guessed. I stepped aside and let her in. We sat at the table quietly. No accusations, no explanations wrapped in excuses, just silence that felt honest instead of heavy. She cleared her throat. I've been going to therapy, she said. Just a few sessions. My therapist asked me when I first started speaking to you, like, I forget you're a person. I blinked. I hadn't expected that. And what did you say? I asked. That I don't know, she whispered. Maybe when I realized you'd never fight back. Maybe when I convinced myself you'd always be there no matter what. I let her words settle. She continued, you changed everything. Mom, the will, your boundaries, the silence. At first, I felt punished. But then I realized you weren't doing anything to me. You were doing something for yourself. She looked at me, eyes clear. I needed that. I folded my hands in my lap. I'm not trying to teach you a lesson. I know, she said, but I'm learning anyway. The tension between us didn't vanish, but it softened like a tight knot finally loosening thread by thread. I want to rebuild this, Clara said quietly. Not force it, not rush it, just grow something better than what we had. I nodded, slowly. She smiled, small and grateful. Slow is good. Before she left, she paused at the doorway. Mom, I want you to have your own life. Not just a life around me. It's time. I looked at her, really looked, and realized she meant it. When she stepped outside, I felt something settle in my chest. Not joy, not closure, something more grounded. After she left, I gathered my things for the community center. When I walked in, the women greeted me like I was one of them. And for the first time, I believed I truly was. I sat down beside Mrs. Hampton as she handed me a fresh notebook. For your journal group, she said. I opened it. Blank pages waiting for stories still unwritten. Healing didn't look like going backward. It looked like roots growing in new soil, roots that finally belonged to me. What does freedom feel like when it is earned the hard way? I asked myself as I lit a single candle in my living room. The only decoration I set out for New Year's Eve. 1 year since the night I stood outside Clara's door with a gift she never opened. 1 year since the words, "Thank God the old woman didn't come," carved something deep into me. 1 year since silence became my boundary instead of my prison. And now, instead of fireworks echoing through a house full of people who didn't see me, I had quiet. A warm cup of tea, a blanket over my lap. Peace, real peace. Not loneliness, not abandonment. Peace. A soft knock tapped at the door around 8 o'clock. Gentle, respectful. I opened it to find Clara holding a small container wrapped in foil. "Hi, Mom," she said softly. "I made you pozole. Just in case you wanted some." I smiled. "Thank you." She didn't step inside without asking this time. "Can I come in for a minute?" "Of course." She entered quietly, placing the container on the counter. Her eyes scanned the living room, the candle, the blanket, the book beside my chair. "You look calm," she said. "I am." She nodded, a hint of sadness drifting across her face. "I'm spending the evening with a few co-workers. Small group, no big party?" "That sounds good," I said. She hesitated. "Mom, I know we're not what we used to be, but I hope someday we'll be something better than what we were." I touched her hand lightly. "We're getting there." Slowly, a faint smile lifted her lips. "Happy New Year." "Mom, Happy New Year." "Clara." She squeezed my hand once before leaving. No demands. No expectations. No tears. Just respect. After she left, I didn't sit down right away. Instead, I went to my bedroom, opened the drawer beneath the dresser, and took out a thin stack of documents Arturo Benitez prepared weeks ago at my request. A final step. A final truth. A quiet revenge not fueled by hatred, but by dignity sharpened into steel. Inside the envelope was a public notice bearing my signature and a lawyer's stamp, a formal declaration confirming that Clara Kessler Rios was removed from all financial claims, assets, and authority. Not because of punishment, but because of documented emotional mistreatment. At the bottom, Arturo had added the distribution list names I recognized. Emma, the couple who laughed about old ladies and their drama. Daniel's friends. Every guest who sat in that room a year ago, enjoying the fun of mocking someone they assumed was too weak to fight back. I slid the documents into a larger envelope and sealed it. Tomorrow morning, Arturo would send the notices out. Not a warning. Not revenge in chaos. Just the truth. Quiet. Legal. Unmoving, delivered to every person who once participated in my humiliation. I sat in my chair, watching the candle flicker against the walls. My house felt different now, stronger. So was I. Later that week, I heard from Rosa that the notice had made its way through Tacoma's social circles. People whispered, they judged, they questioned Clara's character. Opportunities she once assumed were hers began slipping away. Invitations dwindled, and Daniel, who prided himself on appearances, turned cold as ice. One evening, Clara called me, voice thin and trembling. "Mom, people are talking. Daniel is furious. Everyone keeps asking why you filed a public notice." I spoke gently but firmly. Apologies fix guilt, not consequences. She didn't argue. Not anymore. She only whispered, "I understand." After the call, I sat back in my chair, letting the quiet settle over me once more. The candle burned low. Midnight crept closer. Fireworks started crackling over the hill. I didn't make a resolution. I didn't make a wish. I didn't think about the past. I simply breathed deep. Steady, free, and in the stillness, I felt the life that remained when you finally stop living small for someone else. Who do we become when we stop apologizing for our worth, I asked myself as I sat at the community center's long wooden table, my notebook open in front of me. The room hummed with conversations soft, gentle, brave. Women laughed, murmured, shared stories they had once kept locked inside themselves. A year ago, I would have sat in the back corner, hands folded, heart small. Now, they called me by name. "Evelina, can you look at this, Mrs. Patel asked, sliding her journal toward me. I'm trying to write about my childhood, but I can't find the words. You found more than you think, I told her, pointing to the line she had crossed out. This is honest. Start there. She smiled, a tired, grateful smile that reminded me of my own reflection months ago. I didn't think helping others would change me as much as it did, but the more I listened, the more I spoke, the more I understood the truth I had been afraid to say out loud. I was not the weak one. I was the one who survived. After the session ended, as women gathered their things and wrapped scarves around their shoulders, Rosa leaned close and whispered, "You know they need you, mija. You've helped more of them than you realize." I shrugged lightly. I just listen. That's why, she said, listening is a power too many forget they have. When the last woman left, I gathered the journals into a neat stack. The late afternoon light poured through the windows, warm and quiet. I felt settled not in the sense of being stuck, but like a seed that had finally found good soil. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I hesitated before answering. It was Clara. "Hi, Mom?" she said softly. "Are you busy?" "I'm finishing up at the center. What do you need?" "Nothing urgent. I just wanted to hear your voice." I leaned against the table. "How are you?" She let out a slow breath. "Trying. Therapy has been difficult. Daniel and I separated last month." I paused. "I'm sorry you're hurting." "I know," she said, "but I'm not asking you to fix anything. I just wanted to share it." Another breath. "And I wanted to thank you. Losing things forced me to see myself differently. I'm still angry sometimes, still embarrassed, but I'm learning." I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "That's good." I wondered, she added quietly, "if we could have lunch next week, just the two of us. If you want to, I'd like that," I said, slowly. "Yes," she whispered. "Slow is good." We hung up, and the quiet returned not empty, but spacious. Outside the center, the sky had deepened to pale gold. I wrapped my scarf around my neck and walked the few blocks home, my steps steady on the pavement. As I turned the corner, I saw Mr. Hampton sweeping his porch. He waved. "Evening, Evelina, evening," I said, waving back. The world felt familiar again, but not in the way it used to. Not as something I needed to fit into, more like something I had finally claimed space in. At home, I heated a pot of soup, humming as the steam curled upward. I set my plate on the table, lit a small candle, and sat down. No rush, no tension. No bracing for the next demand. Just me, a woman who once believed she needed her daughter's approval to feel whole, now feeling more complete in her own company than she ever had in a crowded room. Later, as I washed dishes, my phone buzzed again, this time with a message from a woman in the journal group. "Thank you for today." I spoke out loud for the first time in years. I didn't think I could. I dried my hands and typed back, "I'm proud of you. Keep going." I set my phone aside and looked around my small kitchen. Everything looked the same cabinets, the same table, the same quiet, but I wasn't the same. Not even close. I had grown new roots, not tangled around Clara, not bent around expectation, but planted firmly in myself. And the ending I once feared, distance, boundaries, painful truth, had become something else entirely. Freedom, the kind I had never realized I needed. What changes when a woman finally chooses herself first? I whispered to myself as I buttoned my favorite navy cardigan, the one Henry used to say made me look like I carried entire oceans in my pockets. It was the anniversary of everything: the dinner, the insult, the walk in the cold, the silence, the rebirth. But this time, I wasn't walking toward anyone. Everyone was walking toward me. Clara arrived early, knocking softly, like a guest who understood she no longer had ownership of the place she once stormed into. "Hi, Mom," she said gently. Her voice was smaller now. Not weak, just stripped of the arrogance she once wore like perfume. "Come in," I said. She stepped inside, holding a small paper bag. "I brought Conscious, the ones you like." I smiled. "Thank you." She sat at my kitchen table, folding her hands. "I wanted to check on you today. I know what this date means. It means I survived." I said. She nodded slowly. And I learned she wasn't wrong. The fallout of the certified notice I mailed to every single dinner guest had reshaped her world in ways she never expected. She had lost clients, credibility, and the easy confidence that came from believing she could do no wrong. Now she earned every inch of goodwill. I poured coffee for both of us. Clara exhaled. "Mom, I know I can't undo everything, but I'm trying to rebuild things the right way." "You are," I said, "but rebuilding doesn't always mean returning things to how they were." "I know," she whispered. "I'm grateful you even let me in the door. Honesty, humility, finally." Just then, my phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Patel, one of the women from the center. "We made a whole circle of women today. They said you gave them courage." Clara glanced at the screen. "They adore you. They see me," I said, more than most people ever did. For once, she didn't flinch. "I'm glad," she said softly. "Really?" We sipped our coffee in the kind of quiet that didn't suffocate, just settled between us like warm linen. After a moment, Clara said, "Mom, Daniel asked about you at a gathering last week." "Oh." He said he regrets laughing that night. Says he didn't realize how cruel it sounded. "Did he apologize directly?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, he said it through someone else." I nodded. "Then he isn't sorry. Not to me." Clara bit her lip. "People still talk about that night. About how I treated you. Consequences." I said, "You learn from them or repeat them?" "And I am learning," she said. I reached out, placing my hand on hers. "I believe that," I said. Her eyes filled. But this time she didn't fall apart. She held herself steady. "Mom," she said, "can we keep trying slowly, on your timeline? Not mine." A year ago, she would have demanded a yes. Today, she waited. "We can," I said. She squeezed my hand. "Thank you." After she left, I stepped outside onto my porch. The winter sun was thin, but it was mine. Rosa waved from across the street. Kids ran past. A dog barked. My world, not fancy, not grand, felt like a kingdom built from my own spine. I breathed it in. Later, at the community center, the women greeted me with cheers. "There she is," Emma said. "The firecracker in sensible shoes." I laughed. "Please, I'm more like a sparkler." "No," she said, looping her arm through mine. "You're a fuse. You changed things." I hadn't set out for revenge, not the petty kind. What I wanted was dignity. What I built was something louder. A life that no one could diminish again. As the session began, I wrote a sentence across the top of the whiteboard. Thank God the old woman did come into her own life again. The room went quiet, then warm, as women smiled at me with the kind of recognition you can't fake. When the meeting ended, I walked home under soft gray clouds, my heart light. That night, before bed, I wrote the last line of the journal I had kept since the insult that broke me and rebuilt me. The night they mocked me was the night I became impossible to ignore. And if you felt this story the way I lived it, tap the like button. Leave a comment, or subscribe so more people can hear the voices they've been told to silence.